In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. How many of you know that line? Yeah, we got a few hobbits in here. It's good. Well, for those of you that don't, I have it in the original this morning. This is The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. If you don't have, what? You don't keep your leather-bound books in leather hard cases? Sorry. And all the teenagers are going, nerd. I want to read you something. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a bare, dry, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green with a shiny brass knob in the exact middle. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very rich and very respectable, not only because they were rich, but also because they had never had any adventures or done anything unexpected. This is the story of how a Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost the neighbor's respect, but he gained, well, you'll see whether he gained anything in the end. I highly recommend it to you. How you doing on your adventure? Do you like adventures? Do you like surprises? Do you like your adventure with Jesus? You see, when Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit runs into a guy named Gandalf, Gandalf is a wizard and invites him on a great adventure. And Gandalf says, when you come home, you're going to have quite a tale to tell. And Bilbo says, can you guarantee that I'll get home? And Gandalf says, no, but if you do, you'll never be the same. We're going to look this morning at a great adventure in God's Word. It's in Numbers chapter 13. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're going, David, that's Old Testament. That's that old boring stuff. All those begats and all those that had a son. And then you got this sacrifice. And you got that sacrifice. And then you got the next sacrifice. And all that old boring stuff. It doesn't mean anything to me today. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Well, we're going to try to unpack a little bit of that. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. It's back to your adventure. Do you have one? Are you in a great adventure with Jesus? Are you comfortable sitting at home in your hobbit hole, doing your little church thing, making everybody think you're a good boy or a good girl, and you never set foot outside of your door to see what God has for you? Just got personal, didn't it? We like Jesus. We like Jesus a lot. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. We like Jesus at Christmas, a little bit at Easter. But does Jesus impact our daily life? Is Jesus enough of my great adventure to interrupt my NFL schedule? Or my kids' sporting events? Or God forbid, is there enough Jesus in my life to interrupt my investment account or my checkbook? Is there enough Jesus in my life to interfere with my reading schedule or what I watch on Netflix? I'm reminded of a poem that I heard probably 40 years ago now. And I got to tell you, it haunts me. It really bothers me. It's written by a guy named Wilbur Reese, and he says, I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep. Just enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of God to make me love a black man or to pick beets with a migrant farmer. I want ecstasy, but not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, but not necessarily a new birth. I want a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I'd like to buy $3 worth of God, please. So now we go to Scripture. What does God tell us in Numbers chapter 13? And you're like, David, you're back to that Old Testament thing again. I'm like, I know, okay? But there's a reason for that. In 1 Corinthians 10, we okay now? We're in the New Testament. We okay with that? Okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I want to read you something. This is the first several verses. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea, and they were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and they all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for their dead bodies were spread out in the wilderness. Now, these things happened as examples for us, so that we would not crave evil things as they indeed craved them. Do not be idolaters as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Nor are we to commit sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Nor are we to put the Lord to the test as some of them did and were killed by the snakes. Nor grumble as some of them did and were killed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them, catch this, as our example. And they were written for our instruction, upon whom the end of the ages have come. Any of you feel like the end of the ages have come? Come on, you live in a weird world. This is not Grandpa's world. This is a strange world that we live in. We see things going on politically, socially, commercially, financially, things we never dreamed of in our wildest imaginations. And we're living in those. Therefore, let the one who thinks he stands watch out that he does not fall. Now, most of us haven't spent a whole lot of time reading the Old Testament. Because, yeah, there's all those begats, and there's all those sacrifices, and all that blood, and all that icky stuff, and weird names. But the Apostle Paul tells us that the Old Testament, and specifically the stuff about the children of Israel, was written, why? Larry got it for me. It's for our instruction. There's something there that we're supposed to learn. There's something written in Numbers 13 that we're supposed to get hold of, and it's supposed to change our lives so that we don't fall dead in the wilderness. So we're going to look at that this morning. There are 4 easy rules for looking at the Old Testament when you're looking at a narrative, a story. It's real easy. What does it say? What happened? Is there some spiritual truth that I'm supposed to get out of it? And if there is, how do I apply that? 4 easy steps. What does it say? What happened as a result? Is there some spiritual truth I'm supposed to take from that? And then how do I apply that in my life? Let me give you an example there. What's a spiritual principle that could apply? Is it a story about obedience? Maybe it's the other way around. Is it a story about disobedience? Is it a story about what happens if you disobey God? Is it a story about having patience? Like the story of, I don't know, Abraham, who waited for years to see his child born? Is it a story about giving? Is it a story about sacrifice? Those are spiritual things that we see in these Old Testament stories that we can learn to apply to us. So let's look here at Numbers chapter 13. We read it previously. I'm not going to go back and reread it all to you again, but the story is pretty simple. The children of Israel have left Egypt. Okay? Everybody okay so far? Somebody wave a hand at me if you're awake. Okay, good. Okay. Children of Israel have left Egypt. They were in bondage for 400 plus years. God sends Moses. The whole Charlton Heston thing, you guys remember the Ten Commandments, right? Okay? All the plagues, the blood and the lice and the frogs and all that stuff. Finally, the Passover. You put the blood over the doorpost. You got ready to go. God sent the death angel that night, and if you didn't have the blood over the doorpost, your firstborn died. Pharaoh finally says, get out of here, leave, take anything you want, just get out of here. So Moses and all the children of Israel leave. What happens next? Anybody know? Red Sea, okay? They get out of town. Pharaoh goes, wait, I must be out of my mind. Let's go get those guys. God parts the Red Sea. They walk across on dry land. They're out now in the Sinai Peninsula, and they're cruising toward the Promised Land. Well, they take about a year to get there. They stop in one place, and they get the Ten Commandments. This is how you're supposed to live. They travel a little further, and God says, now I want you to build the tabernacle. And he sets up the whole sacrificial system, and it takes them 7 or 8 months to actually build the tabernacle. It's a pretty complicated thing that they built. Now they're ready to move on, and at that point, they're right on the edge of the Promised Land. And Moses calls the people together and says, give me one guy from every tribe. They've got to be a leader. And here's what they're going to do. They're going to go up here into the Promised Land, and they're going to spy out the land. They're going to do some recon. They're going to go undercover. Check it out, and here are the rules. See if these people are big or small. See if the land produces or not. See if there are trees in it. See if there's any fruit in it. By the way, if there's any fruit, bring some back. If there's, are they in cities or do they live out in tents? What are these people like? Go find out and let us know. So the 12 spies go out. For 40 days, they travel throughout the land. They go from where they were, south of the Negev Desert, all the way up, almost to the Sea of Galilee. They go all the way from the Mediterranean coast all the way over to the Jordan River. And they come back after 40 days. And they give their report. And their report says, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a really good place to be. Just one snag. They're these giants. Big guys. I don't know if we can win. So 10 of the spies say that. 2 of the spies, named Caleb and Joshua, so, no. We can do this. God has given us this land. Let's go get it. So that's the report that comes back. Now, think about where these people had been for over a year. Where have they been? They've been in the desert for a year. And God has miraculously provided for them not only food but also water. And they're ready to go into the Promised Land, and the report comes back, and they're 2 completely different reports. Think about what it means for a land to flow with milk and honey. You think that's just a pretty expression? Anybody here raise any kind of dairy animal at all? Anybody got a dairy cow or a sheep or a goat? No dairy folks. What do cows and sheep and goats, and if you live in Kusawati, deer, what do they need in order to produce milk? They got to have food. They got to have water, and they got to be able to rest. They chew their cud. They lay down on the ground, and they chew their cud several times, and eventually they produce milk. In order to have a land flowing with milk, you got to have plenty of food and water for the livestock, and it's got to be a place of peace where the animals can lay down and rest. To have honey, what do you got to have honey besides bees? You got to have flowers and plants and stuff for them to get the nectar from. So when they describe this land as a land flowing with milk and honey, that means this is some good stuff. This is not some scrabbled up rocky piece of garbage. This is a really nice land. But they say, but the people are strong, they're fortified cities, and they're giants. And Caleb steps up and says, woo, let's go. Come on, let's hit it. And they all just look at him. And he's like, look, we are more than able to take this land. We can do it. And the others double down. I've always wanted to use this phrase in the sermon, so I'm going to use it right now. The negative nabobs of negativity. I just love that line. Yes, I know I'm stealing it from Spiro Agnew, who stole it from Buchanan, but it's such a great line. The negative nabobs of negativity. They just couldn't see anything good in what God was doing. So they doubled down on this chicken little report they've got, and this time they come back and say, well, it's worse than we told you before. It's actually, well, the land devours the people that live there. Anybody want to live in a land that devours the people that live there? I don't. But that's what these guys came back and said. I mean, they immediately dropped the land flowing with milk and honey stuff, and they got into this negative, oh, it's awful, we're all going to die. Any of you guys remember the Muppet Show? Hands. You remember the Muppets? Okay, good. You young people that don't know Muppets, you're educationally challenged, okay? The Muppets had this great gig that they ran in almost every show. And there were two guys that sat up in the balcony of the theater and they heckled everybody. You remember those guys? You know their names? I had to look it up. It's Stratton and Walford. These two old guys sitting up in the balcony just heckling everybody that does anything. And one of the bits they used to do was like this. They'd say, well, wow, that was great. That was really good. Well, parts of it were good. Yeah, it was okay. Well, some of it needed some work. Well, yeah, parts of it didn't need a lot of work. Well, actually, you know, it wasn't so very good at all. It was bad. Boo, hiss, horrible. That's exactly what these 10 spies did. Oh, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, and it's great, and there's this big fruit, but man, there are giants up there, and oh no, we're all going to die. So the question is, how did 12 people go out and see the exact same thing and come back with two completely different reports? How do you do that? They saw the exact same thing. What was it in their human condition that made them see things so absolutely diametrically different? How can two people sitting in East Ellijay Baptist Church read the same Bible and look at the same world circumstances and take completely different approaches to life? Well, here's how it happens. When we live in fear, when we stop trusting God, we bring a negative report. And it's not just that we stop trusting God. We actually start believing the lies that Satan is telling. I mean, come on. It's bad enough to stop believing God, but to start believing Satan? Really? And beyond that, if you read chapter 14, here's your homework assignment, by the way. Read Numbers 14 this afternoon. When you read Numbers 14 and 15, you'll find out that part of the issue was these guys were all about comfort. They missed the comforts of Egypt. Let's stop just a second. What were these people in Egypt? Slaves. In a year, they've already forgotten They were slaves. And here they are whining about the comforts of Egypt. That's not a trap that is reserved only for the Israelites in Numbers 13. That's a trap we face every day. If we are not careful, we become so consumed with our material things and with our comforts that we start believing the lies of Satan. And it's an extraordinarily dangerous place to be. So what happened? That's the story. Sort of depressing, actually. But let's look at what happened. Joshua and Caleb, the two spies that were faithful, that brought back the good report that said, we can do this. We can take this land. God has promised us, and we are going to fulfill God's promise. Those two guys? Well, Joshua became the leader after Moses. When Moses died, Joshua took his place. And Caleb, I like Caleb. It was 40 years later. Caleb is 85 years old. We got any 85-year-olds in here? I know we do. We got a couple. I know that we do. 85 years old. They're finally going into the promised land. Remember, this is 40 years later. And they're like, Caleb, what are you going to do? And he says, I want that mountain over there. Which one? The one that Moses promised me? The one where the giants are? I want that mountain. I got some giants to go kill. And at 85 years old, Caleb and his family go and drive out the giants from the land around Jerusalem. 85 years old. What happened to everybody else? These are the ones that 1 Corinthians 10 says that the Lord was not pleased with. Well, the first thing they did after they heard this negative report was they got a group together and says, okay, we're going to vote Moses out, we're going to elect a leader, and we're headed back to Egypt. It's a very dangerous thing to do when you tell God you're not going to do what He tells you to do. I can promise you, my friends, it does not end up well. Because in chapter 14 it says that the glory of God came down and filled the tabernacle. And Moses went in to talk to him, and God says, okay, Moses, I am done with these people. I have had it with their rebellion and their backtalk and their griping and their complaining. Get out of the way. I am going to kill every single one of them, and I'm going to start over with you, and I'm still going to fulfill my promise of having a great nation of my own that the Messiah is going to come through. I'm going to still do that, but I'm going to kill all these people. I'm going to start over with you and your family. And Moses intervenes and says, God, please don't do that. The Egyptians and all the other nations will laugh at you. And they'll laugh at us. Please don't do that. And God relented, and He says, okay, Joshua and Caleb, you guys are good. You're going to see the promised land. Everybody else, first of all, you 10 spies, you guys that brought the bad report, bye, boom, and they're dead on the spot. Be careful about bringing negative reports about what God says is positive. Everybody else, everybody over the age of 20, what happened to them? Okay, some Sunday school scholar, tell me, what happened to them? They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years until every single person over the age of 20, except for Joshua and Caleb, died. 40 years of going around the same mountain. Literally wearing the same shoes, wearing the same clothes, because God didn't even let their clothes and their shoes wear out, eating the same thing every single day for 40 years. That sound like fun to anybody? You want to sign up for that? Raise your hand. Nope, I didn't think so. God does not take sin lightly. He does not take our disobedience lightly. When God calls his children to do something, he expects them to do it. It's not the prettiest, happiest ending of an Old Testament story, you know? So if 1 Corinthians 10 says that this particular story was written and recorded for our instruction, I think I want to get instructed. I don't want to die like they did in the wilderness, 23,000 at a time. I sure don't want to die of snake bite. I want to figure out, what did these people do wrong that God was expecting them to do right, and I want to do right. You guys okay? A little heavy? It's going to be okay. Let me tell you, it gets better from here on out, okay? This is the bad part, the good part's coming. Here's what it is. Here are the principles that we can take from this passage of Scripture. First one is this. A great adventure with Jesus is dynamic. It's not boring. It's new every day. Every day you wake up, there's a new adventure with Jesus. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Somebody, please. A good place for amen or oh me, something. Larry does. Okay, good, Larry. Larry has a new adventure with Jesus every single day. Is that right, brother? Amen. Joe? Every day is a new adventure with Jesus. Every day. It's not Bill Murray's Groundhog Day. It's not walking around the wilderness for 40 years. It's something new every morning. There's a new challenge in front of me, a new peace I get to experience, a new opportunity I have to serve someone. Living in God's great adventure is a dynamic, ever-challenging, ever-growing relationship with Jesus. And if it's not, you might want to check out why it's not. Okay? Number 2. God's great adventure is not for cowards. Sorry, it's just not. As a friend of mine says, being a Christian is not for sissies. Anybody notice the world has changed radically in the last 10 years? I mean, come on. Things that we see in the court systems that we never would have dreamed of. I mean, how many of you ever thought your kid would come home from school with a library book that says, "This is my dad, Steve, and this is my dad, Tom"? Your kids live in that world. Who would have ever dreamed that we lived in a world where, okay, I'll go there, where the government can just tell us everything to do and we just sit by idly and go, okay. Where our political officials have no accountability to us whatsoever. That's because we sat back and let it happen. We didn't do anything. Why is it that we have churches filled, but the gospel never comes across the pulpit? One thing, and I probably brag on him too much and his head swells big as his leather hat, but that's okay. You get the word across this pulpit every day that Chad Kelly stands behind it. And I don't know if you know how rare that is. Let me tell you, having been there, done that, that is rare. You should get down on your knees every day and thank God for the pulpit ministry of this church. But we live in a crazy world. We live in a world where people are losing jobs because of what may or may not be true about a disease that we're all facing. And I'm not making light of COVID. Listen, we've got too many people in this church that have suffered from COVID or have lost family members to COVID for me to make light of it. I will never do it. It is an insidious, horrible disease. But at the same time, there are people in our country who have taken advantage of it in order to control people, pure and simple, to make you afraid. You need to make the right medical decisions for you based on the advice of you and your doctor and the advice of God. And live as an independent, grown, free American Christian. It's your duty to do so. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there is a spiritual war out there that does not care if you live or die. Matter of fact, it's happier if you die. Satan wants you dead. Anybody got any question about that? He doesn't want you sharing your faith. He doesn't want you telling people how to live without fear or how to live a godly Christian life. Satan does not want you telling people that homosexual marriage is okay with God. Listen, Satan wants you dead. If you haven't figured that out, wake up. Satan wants to kill you and your kids because he doesn't want the gospel spread. And if you have anything to do with spreading the gospel, you are a target. And if you don't think you are, wake up. Being a Christian, being on God's great adventure is not for sissies. Jesus said, you will be what? Persecuted. If you are my follower, you will be, not might be, you will be persecuted. So I will ask you, if you are not being persecuted, what does that tell you? God's great adventure requires both belief and obedience. Scripture tells us that even the demons believe. They just don't obey. Our problem a lot of times is we don't even believe. The great adventure of the Christian walk involves both belief and action, obedience. This is my favorite one. God's great adventure is not limited by time, money, resources, talent, ability, skill, or age. Man, I like that. I left my wallet down there. That's okay. I got a credit card in my wallet. It has a credit limit on it. That means that they won't advance me more money than is on my credit limit, right? Everybody understand how credit cards work? They agree to loan you a certain amount of money and then charge you an exorbitant amount of interest for the privilege of using their money. God's credit card doesn't have a limit. If God calls you to do it, He's going to pay the bill. If God calls you to feed the hungry, He'll give you the food to do it with. If God calls you to care for the widow and the orphan, oh, that's right, He did call me to care for the widow and the orphan. He'll pay for it. If God calls me to start a new business because that's what God wants me to do, the resources are there. If God calls me to witness to my next door neighbor who's a sorry so-and-so, and I don't even want to talk about my next door neighbor, if God calls you to witness and love and serve that person, can God give you what you need to do that? This is yes. Are you starting to get what I'm saying? God's great adventure is not limited by money or time or resources or knowing people or having the right skill set. If God calls you on your great adventure to do it, He'll take care of what you need. God's great adventure has both an individual and a corporate component to it. Here's what I mean by that, okay? If it's not already obvious, I'm a pretty independent American, freedom-loving guy. you want to know what books I really like, it's the Bible. The Hobbit is not next. The U.S. Constitution's next. So that'll give you an idea of where I live in my world. But there is an individual and a corporate responsibility and reaction to what God tells you to do. What happened to the entire nation of Israel because 10 guys made a bad report and they believed it? What happened? 40 years of judgment. Here's the sad part. Watch this. Caleb and Joshua, they brought a good report. Guess what they did for the next 40 years? They walked around in the desert with all the losers just waiting, right? You are not independent completely in and of yourself as much as our American spirit wants to tell us that. That's true. But at the same time, we are part of a body of Christ. We have responsibilities to one another, to care for each other, to serve each other, to give to one another, to hold each other up. And we have an obligation and a duty to serve the world outside of these walls. Boy, that was weak, but thank you, Larry. We have a duty to serve the world outside of these walls. Okay, that was much better. Thank you. Even inside the church, our individual actions have direct consequences on those around us. And we need to do what God tells us to do. Trying to decide whether to go someplace or not. I'm going to go there. Deacons, lead, follow, or get out of the way. If we are called to leadership, we better be leading. Husbands, if we are called to leadership, we better be leading our families. Sunday school teachers, if you've been called to teach that Sunday school class and to care for that small group of people, you better be doing it. Our individual responsibility has a direct impact on those that are around us. And we cannot shirk that responsibility. Maybe that's harsh. Maybe you think I'm picking on people. I'm not. I'm just telling you. God takes leadership incredibly importantly because it doesn't just affect the individual husband, the individual dad. Oh, I'm not a dad, so I'm trying to be good. Dads, you got a job to do, and you better do it because your kid's life is at stake. Because the same Satan that wants to kill you wants to kill your kid. And if they can't flat out kill them, they'll take them so far away from Jesus that they couldn't see the church door with a 10-power hunting scope. Dad, that's your primary responsibility. It's not making money. It's not having the biggest fantasy league score. Your primary job is you raise those kids. If you need a movie theme for this, Christianity is not about the Lone Ranger. Christianity is about the cowboys. That's the John Wayne movie, The Cowboys. There's a corporate responsibility we have. Lastly, God's great adventure is limited only by how you see yourself. What did those spies say? Oh, they're giants. We look like grasshoppers in our eyes. Did the giants tell them they were grasshoppers? No. They self-identified as grasshoppers. The spies were afraid. They decided for themselves that they were grasshoppers. Everybody except for Caleb and Joshua. Caleb said, I ain't seen no grasshoppers. I ain't no grasshopper. I'm a giant killer. Let me at him. We are limited in what God can accomplish in our lives only to the degree that we see ourselves as grasshoppers. Oh, we can't impact the school system, all that government stuff. No, yes, you can. Run for the school board. Oh, we can't affect government, all that bunch up there in Washington, they're just horrible. Yeah, they are. Run for Congress. Oh, Dave, you don't think somebody in this congregation should run for Congress, do you? Why not? I don't know. There are 435 of them in the House and 100 of them in the Senate, and a bunch of them probably go to church somewhere. I don't know. We are limited only by what we believe. So how do we apply all this? Isn't that where the rubber meets the road? Otherwise you came here and you listened for, 50 minutes. If there's no application, so what? You'll go home and you'll turn the TV on and you'll watch the ball game and so what? I want to give you some real practical ways to apply this. First of all, spy out the land. That means do something intentionally. That means don't just sit back and let life just roll by you. Sit down and say, okay, Jesus, what am I supposed to do tomorrow? What do you want me to do? As a dad, as a husband, as a businessman, as a retiree, God, what do you want me to do tomorrow? It may be the same thing I did yesterday, but I don't want to just assume that because I did it yesterday, I'm supposed to do it tomorrow. God, what do you want me to do today? Who do you want me to run into and witness to? Who do you want me to disciple? Who do you want me to befriend? Who do you have out there that needs some of the money that I've got stuck in my wallet? Jesus, what is there to do today? What do you want me to do today? But you know what's hard about that? In order to do that, I have to erase my agenda. I have to take all my wants off the list. But if you want to have this great adventure with God, you start it by saying, what do you want me to do today? Second thing, pray for wisdom. Pray for wisdom. James chapter 1 says, if any man or woman lacks wisdom, what? Ask. And what does God do when you ask for wisdom? Oh, He gives it to you. What a cool gig. Ask for wisdom, get wisdom. Pretty good deal. So why don't we do it? Thirdly, always do what God says to do. We talked about this just a little bit in Sunday school this morning. We're talking about the will of God and how do you know the will of God? One of the ways you know the will of God is always do the next right thing. It's not complicated. I heard a great story a few weeks ago about a guy who started working for Campus Crusade. As a very young man, he worked at a college campus in one of their little outreach ministries. And eventually he became the director of Campus Crusade at that school. And eventually became sort of the state Campus Crusade guy. Then eventually he got sent to Romania when Romania was still under the Iron Curtain. And it's like, and how does Campus Crusade work there? So he lived in an apartment, he and his wife and his kids, and he just befriended students. And over the several years he was there, he built this incredible network of underground church pastors and teachers and disciplers and people who could get stuff done. And all of a sudden, the Iron Curtain fell, and Christian missionaries were being flooded into Romania. And they said, we have no infrastructure. We know nothing about Romania. And he said, I do. And he became responsible for organizing mission activity all over the former Eastern Bloc. Just doing what the next right thing was. And then his parents got sick. And he came back stateside. And he resigned from Campus Crusade, and he spent the next several years of his life caring for his elderly mother and father. And people would come to him and say, you've got so much talent, you've got so many gifts, you've got so much experience. How can you waste your time taking care of your elderly parents? And his response was, God has called me to honor my parents. And it is the greatest joy in my life to help my father to the bathroom. See, he understood that it's not about accolades, it's not about money, it's not about power, it's not about influence. It's about doing the next right thing. If you're struggling in your life with knowing the will of God or with your purpose or what you should be doing as the next step, do the right thing today and ask God for wisdom. Fourth thing, and this is the biggest one. Do not limit God. Don't you dare limit God. Don't you say, I'm a grasshopper. Just don't do it. Just don't do it because it's so insidious. It hurts us so badly. You know, and I know what you're saying. You're saying, but David, you don't understand. I want to start a new business, but I don't have any money. Okay? Got to have money to start a new business, right? First question is God telling you to start a new business? If the answer is yes, God's got all the money he needs. And if God wants you to start a new business, God will help you figure out how to get the money you need. But you've got to believe and obey. So, well, Dave, you just don't know. You don't know all the things I've done. I just can't talk to people. I just can't talk to people. Okay. My response. I don't care. Moses couldn't talk to people either. Moses couldn't talk to people. The Apostle Paul says, Apollos is a whole lot better preacher than I am. I'm slow of speech and I stumble around. But David, you don't understand, I hate to say this, but David, I've been divorced twice. So? Paul was a murderer. David was a murderer. Moses was a murderer. I don't care what you've done in your past. God doesn't care what you've done in your past. It doesn't disqualify you. Stop looking at yourself like a grasshopper because of your past. Your past does not control you, nor does it set the course of your future. God and God alone sets the course of your future if you're obedient. Do you know who you are in Jesus? I mean, really? I think some of us sometimes need to remind ourselves of this. I know I need to remind myself of this. So I'm going to do a little pep talk here. Here's who you are in Jesus. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Anybody here been afraid the last week? I have. Anybody here felt weak this last week? Anybody not been very loving this last week? Anybody thought you were losing your ever-loving mind this last week? I better see every hand in the place. Okay? God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Tape that to your mirror. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Forgetting those things that are behind and reaching forward to those things that are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. You guys getting it? You need some more? Okay. There is therefore now no condemnation, not some condemnation. There is no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. I like that one. For his divine power has granted to us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and excellence. You guys convinced yet? Apparently not. Okay. I have called you friends because all the things that I've heard from my Father I've made known to you. Therefore you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. You're from God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. So what is your problem, grasshopper? And I'm preaching to myself because I have to get up and live with me every day. But we are not grasshoppers. We are more than conquerors. We are joint heirs with Jesus Christ. It's time we started living like it. This great adventure that God talks about, it's marvelous and it's different from every one of us. Your adventure is different than mine. Your calling is different than mine. The opportunities you have in front of you are different than mine. And that's what makes it so incredible. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to respond, okay? You have to respond because you can't hear the Word of God and not respond. If you don't do anything positive about it, you're telling God, shut up. If you see yourself as a grasshopper, you're telling God, you're just a liar. Getting a little deep? Getting a little thick? We all respond. Every time we hear the Word of God, every time the Spirit of God calls us to do something, we respond one way or another. So this morning, we're going to respond. Now, some of you here, I don't know if there's... I obviously don't know everybody in the room, but I think most people in the room here are Christians. But if you're not, if you're watching by live stream and you're not a Christian, today's your day. Amen. You know the truth. If you don't, here it is real quick. You're a sinner. You're condemned by God because of your sin, because there's a debt of righteousness you cannot pay. And Jesus Christ voluntarily, the very Son of God, sacrificed himself on a Roman crucifixion stick so that you could be forgiven for every sin you've ever committed or ever will commit. And he rose from the dead to prove he had the power to do it. And if you believe what Jesus says about himself, he will make you his child and he will forgive you for every sin you ever had. You now know the truth. You can respond. Some of you started off on this great adventure, but you got bucked off the horse. And for whatever reason, you've been sitting in the dirt. Sitting there in the corral, you got your blue jeans on, you got your chaps on, you got your vest on, you got your cowboy hat on, but you're just sitting in the dirt. And Jesus says, saddle up. Time to get back on that horse. Grab the reins, square up, and cowboy up. If you started off well and you found yourself no longer enjoying the great adventure with God, saddle up. Get back in front of God and say, I'm sorry, I've screwed up. I need to fix this. You need to forgive me. And you need to show me what to do next. Because I'm not going to sit in a hobbit hole. I'm going to go on the great adventure. Some of you are going to say, Dave, I'm too old. I've done my bit. I've been there, done that. I got a whole box load of T-shirts. I'm just too old. I can't do it anymore. Thank you, grasshopper. Caleb says, saddle up. When Caleb was 85 years old, he took his mountain. He killed his giants. What can you do if you've been doing this for a gazillion years? You do it for another one. You do the next right thing. Well, Dave, physically, I can't do what I used to do. I understand that. But I bet you know how to pray. I bet you know how to encourage people. Listen, Grandpa Grasshopper, us young whippersnappers need some help. You know where the snakes are. You know where the barbed wire is. You know where all the bad spots in the road are. And we need your wisdom. We need your help. We need your experience. So, Grandpa, saddle up. Step up next to some young buckaroo and help them down the road. There's something for all of us to do in this great adventure. Or maybe you're going to say, I blew it. I sinned. Maybe you're an ex-con. I don't know. Maybe you sinned really, like one of those really bad, stupid sins. You know, the ones that everybody sees and they put out on TV. You did one of those. Maybe you destroyed your family. Maybe you destroyed your health with drugs. I don't know what you did. But I'm done. God can't do anything with me anymore. In the immortal words of Sherman Potter, remember Colonel Potter from MASH? Remember him? In his immortal words, horse hockey. God is a God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. You can't go so far away from God that He doesn't have another chance left for you. So if you've wrecked your Christian life, if you've wrecked your Christian testimony, whatever you've done, you think you've just blown it farther than it can ever be blown, saddle up. There's a trail to blaze for you that God has laid out for you. He is a God of second chances. Not only second chances, He's a God of restoration. God knows where all of us are this morning. And I'm going to shut up right now, and all God's people said, amen, okay?